If you can't face it, you must. If you must, then you will. And if you will, you'll find out you always could. Let me ask you something. What's the one thing you've been avoiding? That conversation? That decision? That dream you buried so deep it's starting to rot? Whatever just came to your mind, that's your battlefield. And by the time this video ends, you'll either conquer it or surrender for good. This is not about motivation. This is about transformation. Because the moment you say, I can't, is the exact moment you must. Fear is a strange creature. It doesn't need evidence. It just needs silence. See, fear doesn't thrive in action. It thrives in avoidance. It grows in the corners of our minds where we refuse to shine a light. Not because the fear is real, but because we never tested it. You avoid the phone call. You avoid the mirror. You avoid the truth. And suddenly, the fear has grown teeth, fangs, a voice that sounds just like yours. That's how fear works. It whispers until it echoes. I once knew a man who was terrified of public speaking. And I don't mean butterflies in your stomach, kind of nervous. I mean full-blown panic. Just the thought of standing in front of a group would make his palms sweat. His throat would close. He'd shut down completely. For years, he avoided it, turned down promotions, skipped meetings, stayed small. But then something happened. His daughter turned 13, and she asked him to give a speech at her birthday party. Just a few words. Now, what do you do when your excuse meets your why? You step in or you step out? He said yes. He spent 3 weeks preparing 4 lines, wrote them, memorized them, practiced them. The night of the party, he shook like a leaf. But when he stood up and looked at his daughter, he delivered every word. It wasn't perfect, but it was powerful. And after that, he gave a speech every year. Not because he stopped being afraid, but because he stopped being unwilling. What changed? He stopped feeding fear with avoidance and started starving it with action. Psychologically, this is known as exposure therapy. The more you face a fear, the less power it holds over your nervous system. You train your mind to reprocess the threat as non-lethal. And when your brain believes it's survivable, it stops overreacting. So the rule is simple. If something scares you, you move toward it, not away. Because fear is like mold. It only grows in the dark. You shine a light on it, it starts to die. That conversation you've been avoiding, that decision you keep postponing, that dream you've delayed until you feel ready, those are the shadows. That's where fear multiplies. But when you step into it, when you take the first breath, the first move, the first swing, suddenly you realize it was never as big as you thought. You just never gave a chance to shrink. So if fear is whispering today, don't run. Turn on the light. Because the moment you face it is the moment it fades. And the longer you hide from it, the louder it grows. Remember this. Fear only grows in the dark. So face in the light. And it won't grow at all. Growth doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for a convenient moment. It doesn't ask, hey, are you ready now? It shows up uninvited, uncomfortable, and inconvenient. That's the nature of growth. It doesn't need your permission. It just needs your participation. Think about it. Have you ever grown during the easy times? When the bills were paid, when everyone agreed with you, when everything made sense? Of course not. Growth shows up in the mess, in the doubt, in the stretch. I met a young woman in Denver a few years ago. She had a steady job, paid the rent, took home a decent check. But deep down, she wanted to start a business. Had an idea, had the skills, but fear held her hostage. One day, her company went under. Just like that, job gone, security gone, comfort replaced with chaos. And I'll never forget what she told me. She said, I was waiting for the right time to grow, but life didn't wait for me. That's when she finally launched her business. No safety net, no plan B, just a need to move. And here's the kicker. She didn't just survive, she thrived. Because growth forced her into motion. It's easy to think growth is something you choose when you're ready. But most times, growth chooses you when you're not. It throws you into the deep end. not to drown you, but to teach you how to breathe underwater. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where people, after experiencing challenge or loss, develop a deeper sense of strength, purpose, and resilience. They don't just return to who they were. They evolve into who they were meant to be. But it starts with one decision. Stop resisting. Start responding. See, life isn't asking you to be fearless. It's asking you to move anyway. To trust the process even when the path isn't lit. To show up even shaking when your instinct says hide. Because every time you step into uncertainty, you give growth permission to rebuild you. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait for applause. Don't wait until the fear is gone. You'll wait your whole life. Instead, move with the fear. Move with the doubt. Move with the confusion. Because growth doesn't wait for your permission slip. It just shows up and says, you're up next. And when you stop resisting it, when you stop trying to schedule your transformation, that's when you rise. Not because it was easy, but because you were willing. So remember, growth doesn't ask for permission. It asks for action. And the moment you say yes, life begins again. Everyone wants the prize, but no one wants to pay the price. And here's the truth most people run from. Pain is not the punishment. Pain is the process. It's the toll booth you pass through to get to strength, to clarity, to purpose. You can't skip it. You can't fake it. You can't shortcut it. Pain is the entry fee to power. You think the great ones got there without it? You think the giants of history strolled into greatness? No, they bled. They broke. They endured. And that pain didn't weaken them. It woke them up. I remember a man who came to one of my early seminars. Lost his business. Lost his house. His wife left. He said to me, "Jim, I feel like I'm losing everything that mattered." I looked him in the eyes and said, "No, sir, you're losing everything that was weighing you down. Now it's your turn to build something that can't be taken." He didn't get it at first, but 6 months later, he sent me a letter. He'd started a small company, slept on a friend's couch, worked 14-hour days. But this time, he was building it his way, with grit, with gratitude, with zero illusions. He said, "The pain I thought would break me became the thing that built me." That's the shift. Psychologists call it transformational adversity. The idea that, through pain, we unlock higher levels of meaning, resilience, and internal power, not despite the pain, but because of it. You see, pain strips away what's not essential. It burns off ego. It removes the masks. And underneath all that noise, that's where your real self is waiting. You want confidence? Walk through failure. You want wisdom? Face your regrets. You want strength? Endure the storm without running from it. And here's the beautiful paradox. Once you stop avoiding pain, you stop fearing it. Once you stop fearing it, you become free. Because the thing most people run from is the very thing that would set them apart. Most quit when it hurts. Few lean in, but the few who do, they rise, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. So if you're in pain right now, don't curse it. Don't hide from it. Don't numb it. Learn from it. Let it mold you. Let it sharpen you. Let it refine you. Because every scar you carry isn't just a wound. It's proof that you walked through hell and kept going. And when the smoke clears, you'll stand not as a victim, but as a weapon. Remember, pain is the entry fee to power, and the price is always worth it. Most people never realize this, but the words you use are the boundaries you live inside. Language doesn't just describe your world. It defines it. It builds the walls you can't see and then convinces you they're real. You say, "I can't." Now you won't. You say, "I'm not that kind of person." Now you'll never become one. You say, "I've always been this way." And you've sentenced yourself to stay that way forever. The words become your prison. Let me ask you something. How often do you talk yourself out of progress just by the way you speak? "I'll never be good with money." "I'm not a morning person." "I'm not smart enough for that." Each phrase, harmless on the surface, but lethal beneath it, because once you declare it, your brain starts protecting that belief. Psychologists call this the self-fulfilling prophecy. Say it enough, and your subconscious makes it true. That's not mindset. That's a mental trap. I once worked with a man who'd been overweight for years. Not because he didn't try, but because of how he talked. He kept saying, I got bad genes. I've got no discipline. I've always been the fat guy. That's what he repeated every day. So guess what? That's what he became. Until one day I asked him, what if you're not the fat guy? You're just a guy who believed he was? He paused. For the first time, he saw it wasn't just the food or the habits. It was a language that kept him stuck. We changed it. He stopped saying, I can't eat healthy. Started saying, I'm learning to eat like the person I want to be. He stopped saying, I've got no control. Started saying, I'm taking responsibility. 6 months later, he was down 45 pounds. Not because of a magical diet, but because he rewrote his narrative. That's the power of language. You see, your brain listens when you speak. And the more rigid your words, the more rigid your life becomes. These things never work for me. That's not truth. That's a verbal cage. So start choosing words that stretch you instead of shrink you. Instead of I can't, say I haven't yet. Instead of I'm stuck, say I'm learning to move through this. Because language doesn't just reflect your reality, it builds it. Your words are blueprints. Speak like a prisoner. Live like one. Speak like a leader and watch your life rise to meet your voice. So if your world feels small, maybe your vocabulary is too. Change the language, and you'll change the limits. Remember, language creates limitation. Unless you learn to speak the life you want instead of the one you're afraid of. Most people are afraid of failing. But I'll tell you something more dangerous than failure: standing still. Failure at least means you tried. You risked. You moved. You dared. But stagnation? That's when the body's breathing. But the spirit's already gone numb. You ever met someone who stopped growing 10 years ago, but didn't realize it? Still doing the same job, thinking the same thoughts, living the same year on repeat. Like a scratch record? That's not safety. That's not stability. That's quiet desperation wearing a polite face. And here's a deception. Stagnation feels safe. Because nothing goes wrong, but nothing goes right either. No risk, no reward, no danger, no destiny. Let me tell you a story. A man I once coached was terrified of changing careers. He hated his job, felt drained every day. But it paid well, and he was comfortable. So he stayed, year after year. When I asked him, why not move? Why not try something new? He said, I'm afraid I'll fail. But here's what I told him. You're failing now. You're failing your potential. You're failing your passion. But because the paycheck still clears, you convince yourself it's okay. He paused. That hit him hard. See, failure is feedback. It teaches. It sharpens. It evolves you. But stagnation? It numbs you into forgetting there's even a battle to fight. Psychologically, stagnation breeds something called learned helplessness, where you stop trying because you stop believing your efforts matter. It's a slow death, a silent one. I'd rather fall flat on my face chasing something meaningful than sit still in something lifeless and call it security. Because when you fail, at least you gather data. You learn. You adjust. You try again, wiser. But when you stagnate, you get nothing back. No lessons. No momentum. No growth. Just time slipping by, quietly and irreversibly. And here's the truth. Most people aren't burnout. They're just bored out of their minds. Bored of hiding their brilliance. Bored of shrinking their dreams. Bored pretending fine is enough. So let me ask you, when was the last time you challenged yourself? Not survived, grew. Because life isn't asking you to be perfect. It's asking you to progress. An inch, a lesson, a risk, anything but stillness. You don't need a full plan. You just need movement. Because motion is how the mind wakes up again. And no matter how far you've drifted into comfort, you can start paddling back today. Remember, the enemy isn't failure. The enemy is stagnation dressed up as success. Fail forward. Move messy. But for the love of your own future, don't stay still. What if the very thing you've been avoiding is the doorway to the strength you've been searching for, not the easy path, not the polished plan, but that one conversation you've been putting off, that project you delayed, that fear you pretend isn't there. You see, what we avoid isn't random. It's revealing. It reveals where we've handed away our power. Psychologists call it the avoidance cycle. You feel discomfort, you dodge the trigger, you get short-term relief, but in the long run, you shrink. Your world gets smaller, your options get narrower, and your confidence begins to erode because you know what you're hiding from. I once knew a man who wouldn't speak on stage. He had the knowledge, the credentials, the wisdom, but when opportunities came, he'd decline. He said he was too busy, said it wasn't the right time. Truth? He was terrified of being seen, terrified of stumbling over his words. But you know what's funny? That fear wasn't the enemy. That fear was a signal. It was pointing directly to the skill he needed to grow, the confidence he needed to reclaim, the power he hadn't yet stepped into. The things you avoid aren't meant to be buried. They're meant to be broken through. Avoidance is like dragging a shadow behind you. It slows you down and darkens your light until you stop and face it. Here's a truth I've seen over and over. Growth doesn't live where it's comfortable. It lives where it's confronted. The gym doesn't build you up unless it tears the muscle first. Healing doesn't start until the wound is touched. Leadership doesn't emerge until someone's willing to say, "Put it on me." You don't gain power by doing what's easy. You gain it by doing what's essential. And often, the most essential thing is the one you've been postponing. That conversation with your spouse. That phone call you've been dreading. That truth you've been suppressing for years. When you turn toward it fully, something awakens. Not just courage, but clarity. You realize it was never about the task. It was about the belief that you weren't strong enough to handle it. But here's the beautiful paradox. Every time you face what you fear, you find out you were always bigger than the thing itself. The mountain wasn't too high. You were just too afraid to climb. Until you did. So the next time your gut says, "Not that, not now," lean in, get curious. Ask, what strength am I about to meet on the other side of this? Because what you avoid owns you, but what you confront frees you. And what's been hiding behind that avoidance all along is a version of you that doesn't flinch anymore. Pressure doesn't break you. It exposes you. It doesn't create your character. It reveals it. Like heat under metal. It shows what you're really made of, not what you pretend to be when things are calm. You see, when everything's going smooth, anyone can be composed. Anybody can be kind, patient, and focused when the sun's shining. But life doesn't hand out trophies for how you behave in peace. Life watches how you respond in chaos. Pressure is the great revealer. It strips away the surface. It pulls out the truth beneath the polish. You want to know who someone really is? Watch them under stress. When the money runs low, when the dream gets delayed, when the plan breaks, that's when the mask comes off. I once worked with a young athlete, talented, confident, always smiling at practice. But when game day came and the pressure was on, he froze, made excuses, blamed teammates. He wasn't lazy. He was just untested. He had built skill, but not resilience. He could perform, but only when it was easy. I pulled him aside one day and said, "Son, you're not failing because you're weak. You're failing because you've never met yourself under real heat. Because pressure doesn't weaken you. It introduces you to the parts of yourself you've never trained. Psychologically, when pressure hits, it activates our survival brain. And that's where real leadership, real decision-making, real discipline, live or die. You either fall back into your habits, or you rise into your standards. Here's what's wild. Diamonds and dust are made of the same thing. Carbon, what separates them? Pressure. You can let it crush you or shape you. And the difference isn't your background, your talent, or your education. It's your mindset. You have to condition yourself before the moment hits. So when it does, you don't collapse, you respond. The people you admire, the ones who stay calm in crisis, lead in chaos, rise in storms. They aren't lucky. They've been through something. They've trained in pressure. They've failed and come back stronger. You want to grow? Stop avoiding high-stakes moments. Step into them. Not recklessly, but intentionally, because pressure gives you data. It shows you exactly what needs to be developed. It shines a light on the cracks so you can strengthen the foundation. So the next time you feel pressure mounting, don't panic. Get still. Get sharp. Say, this is where I meet the next level of myself. Remember, when life turns up the heat, it's not punishment. It's preparation. Let it reveal you. Let it refine you. Because in pressure, you don't just discover strength. You become it. Everyone wants the breakthrough, but very few want the discipline that leads to it. Because breakthrough doesn't show up at random. It's earned. And the price you pay? Obedience. Obedience to what? To your convictions. To your habits. To the voice inside that whispers, do it even when it's hard. We live in a world that worships results, but forgets the process. People want elevation without instruction. They want blessings without obedience. But life doesn't work that way. There is no success without submission, no greatness without alignment. You must obey the small voice of consistency before you get to experience the loud applause of success. Let me tell you a story. A man once asked a sculptor, "How do you carve such a perfect line from a block of stone?" The sculptor replied, "Simple. I just remove everything that doesn't look like a lion." Breakthrough is the same. It comes not when you add more, but when you cut away what no longer belongs. And that takes obedience. Obedience to routine, to values, to a higher standard, even when no one's watching. I remember working with a woman who had all the talent in the world, sharp mind, huge vision. But every time she got close to a breakthrough, she'd sabotage it, not because she didn't want it, but because she refused to submit to the process. She chased motivation, not mastery. She waited for the right feeling instead of honoring the right action. Her life changed, not when she found a secret, but when she learned to obey her daily disciplines no matter how she felt. That's the key. Breakthrough isn't found in inspiration. It's found in obedience. Psychologically, your brain craves freedom, but it thrives in structure. It wants comfort, but it grows in commitment. And the people who win in the long run aren't the ones with the best ideas. They're the ones who obeyed the grind long after it stopped being exciting. They wrote the pages when they didn't feel like it. They showed up when it was inconvenient. They listened when their ego wanted to rebel. That's obedience. It's not weakness. It's power under control. Because every time you obey what your higher self demands, you say no to the version of you that settles, and say yes to the version that rises. So if you're waiting for a breakthrough, stop waiting. Start obeying. The voice inside that says, "This is who I am now. This is what I do." That voice, it's not trying to limit you. It's trying to lead you. And if you'll follow it, you'll find that everything you've been praying for, grinding for, bleeding for, is waiting on the other side of one decision. Will you obey your calling or betray it? Because the breakthrough you want has already been promised, but it's only delivered through obedience. How many lives have been wasted waiting for the right feeling? You know what I mean. I'll do it when I feel ready. I'll change when I feel motivated. I'll start when it feels right. But here's the hard truth. Feelings are liars. They fluctuate. They deceive. They keep you stuck in cycles, comfortable but unfulfilled, busy but not becoming. If you build your life around emotion, you'll never have the engine to build anything that lasts. You don't rise when you feel like it. You rise when you decide. The most successful people you admire, they didn't feel like waking up early. They didn't feel like facing failure again. They didn't feel like saying no to distractions. But they decided to do it anyway. That's what separates the amateur from the professional, the wishful thinker from the finisher, the dreamer from the doer. I once met a young man who said, "Mr. Rohn, I'm just waiting for that spark, that fire to get me going." I said, "Son, if you keep waiting for fire, you'll freeze your future to death. You don't wait for fire. You strike the match." Because power is in the decision, not the emotion. Psychologically, the brain is designed to protect you from discomfort. It whispers reasons to wait. It magnifies risk. It delays action by dangling emotion like a carrot. But your breakthrough, it's not emotional. It's intentional. You don't need to feel like working out. You need to decide to move. You don't need to feel confident. You need to decide to speak. You don't need to feel ready. You need to decide to begin. And here's what's incredible. When you decide first, feelings follow. Make the call. Send the email. Write the first page. Walk in the room. Speak up. Apply. Start. You take the step, and clarity chases action. Momentum answers obedience. Confidence grows in the doing. One of the greatest shifts in life is this: learning that you're not your feelings. You are your choices. And every time you choose discipline over delay, alignment over excuses, purpose over preference, you change who you are. That's where freedom is born. Stop sitting on the sidelines of your own life, waiting for motivation to invite you in. It's not coming, but you can. So let me ask you, what decision have you been postponing, hoping a feeling would come rescue you? It won't, but you don't need it to, because today, you're powerful enough to decide, to cut the rope, to walk through the door, to step into who you were born to be. And when you do, you won't just move forward. You'll break free, not because you felt like it, but because you decided. Look, every time you say, I can't, you're handing over your power. And every time you say, if I must, then I will, you become unstoppable. So here's the final truth. Your future doesn't need permission. It needs a decision. You don't have to feel ready. You just have to decide you're done being the version of you that hides. Because the moment you stop negotiating with fear is the moment you start negotiating with destiny. So say it with me. If I can't, I must. If I must, I can. And starting today, you will.